Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Leading with Artivism. This is a program by poet Gold Wilkerson in collaboration with Arts Mid-Hudson. Before we get started, I'd just like to give you a few extra information bits. First of all, closed captions are available. To activate on YouTube, click on the CC button at the bottom right of the screen. To change your language, font size, or color, click on the settings icon. It looks like a little gear. And then click on subtitles, CC for language, and options for font size and color. You can also submit your questions in the comment section, and that's usually on the bottom of your screen. I hope that you'll consider that. And the views and opinions expressed are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views or position of Arts Mid-Hudson. So first of all, I'm going to give you a little brief overview. Poet Gold is a rare talent who grabs you by the heart and says, recognize. She is a poet, author, performer, songwriter, community artivist, and speaker. Bettina Poet Gold Wilkerson is pushing the boundaries of poetry and the spoken word. Living with a chronic illness since childhood, Poet Gold, or as she is affectionately known as Gold, brings a soul-searching insight about the human existence, love, dreams, challenges, and triumph. Poet Gold was appointed and served as the Dutchess County Poet Laureate for 2 terms and is the founder of Poetry Fest in Poughkeepsie, New York. She was awarded the Dutchess County Executive's Artivism Award and continues sharing her poetic performances with local communities and beyond. And tonight, Poet Gold's guest is Vienna Carroll. She is a singer, playwright, actor, historian, and herbalist. The fire in her soul lights up the fire in yours, and Vienna's folksy blues and soulful funk take you back to church and her roots. She learned music from the Black ladies of her youth, including her fearsome great-grandmother who accompanied Grand Ole Opry country radio on her guitar every Saturday night, but played only proper Pentecostal chords on Sunday. Vienna also attended her grandmother's Baptist church and sang in the choir at her family's AME church. At her Alabama grandmother's 125-acre working farm, she listened to gospel and country on the radio and was joined in the Sunday church services an hours away down a dusty road where singing was often accompanied only by the hand clapping and shouting of its fervent members. She later formalized her study of early African-American music and culture at Yale University, where she received a BA in African American Studies. The passion in Vienna's voice and her masterful storytelling fill the room. She interweaves old songs and forgotten stories of Black heroes, showing her influences of Nina Simone, Ray Charles, Dinah Washington, and her early church experiences. Vienna has a newly released CD, Harlem Field Recordings, Black Roots Music with a Groove, featuring her on vocals. And now we're going to show a little snippet of a video featuring Vienna.
I am going to start with ancient African queens because too often we forget that our history did not start here in the United States as enslaved people. And I want to introduce you to another queen here in the US, and she was an oyster shucker. Her name was Creola Johnson. And she sang a song, I don't want nobody stumbling over me. That is why I pray so hard. And she said she learned that song from her folks who were enslaved, and they sang it in the field. And so now I would like to lift up all of the women who don't want nobody stumbling over them. I don't want nobody stumbling over me. That is why I pray. That is why I pray. next, I'd like to share with you a very little known part of American history, and that is the part of Black sailors. By 1820, they were 22% of the folks who were moving on water. They were enslaved men, they were free men. They went to the Caribbean, to Europe, even as far as Japan and New Zealand on whaling ships. The result of this was that they were able to come back and tell stories of how they were treated elsewhere. They helped develop and raise the freedom ethos of their land based brethren. So it's the call and response tune. I'm going to call, well, I'm going away to leave you. And you'll respond, oh, shallow brown. The next song I want to share with you is also a spiritual. This train is bound for glory. This train is a clean train. Everybody ride it in Jesus' name. Now, just like the last tune, it could be used for your own spiritual upliftment, or it could be used as a call to arms, as a code song. This train is bound for glory. If you want to ride it, you have to be holy. This train is a clean train. This train. I know this train is a clean train. This train.
I felt like I was right there in the audience, This train, absolutely. Welcome, Vienna. Welcome, Ms. Carroll. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. Good. I'm doing really great. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, you're here with Leading with Artivism, and we're just simply, I want you to relax. We're just going to have a conversation that's simply about Artivism and the work that you do. And we collect questions also from our audience members and people who may have registered early. So why don't we start at the top? And let's define what Artivism is for you. What does the word Artivism mean to you?
So it's your art in the service of, for me, my perspective, my political perspective, and my wanting to share the history of Black people and showing how we freed ourselves from slavery. Just turning that perspective of us as having been taken care of, and not having self-determination, and not being the center of our own freedom stories. And too often we don't share, our heroes and heroines are not uplifted. And so you can have people framing wrong questions. Children frame, why didn't we resist? Which is the wrong question. The right question is, why have they suppressed it so hard? Right. So for me, art is just telling our story in the correct way.
Got you. And that's an expression of your artivism. Something key that you pointed out about the questions and how the questions are framed versus, why didn't we do something? I remember seeing something on Instagram on a leadership page, and it referenced, I am not my ancestors. And so I had a response to that, and I said, it is because of your ancestors that you can voice who you are today. I understood what the youngin was trying to say, but I also wanted to, bring forth that it was the struggle of our ancestors that allow you to actually stand there with this sign.
And not only, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, dear.
Not only that, but he or she, that person, only has one very narrow perspective. Absolutely. Of who the ancestor is. And that perspective has really served a white supremacy. I'm so happy for the conversation that is part of the national discourse now. Do you know, I found out just yesterday that my school district, where I graduated from high school, has banned books by Ibram X. Kendi, and even children's books. I am Martin Luther King. I am Rosa Parks since last October.
Right.
And the books have just been unbanned because the people came together, and there were some other activities. Other folks were collecting books and offering free library stands all over the little town. I come from a small town in Pennsylvania, but it's, and the white parents there said, I don't want my children to feel guilty, or I think those were the words. But like, what have our children, what have we been feeling all of this time?
Mm-hmm.
Less than, and certainly, and then when our story is told, we're not in the center of it. We always have some white savior who is helping us, and that is not correct.
Right, right. Which goes back to something that you also pointed out in the introduction of the video, the history beyond slavery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes when we're sharing history about who we are as Black people, who we are as African Americans, it has a tendency to begin at 1619.
Right. That's right. That's
But
right.
what happened before that?
Mhm.
Who were we in the villages then?
Mhm.
Were we farmers? Were we agriculturals? Were we kings and queens? We were a diversity of people just like any other group, but that story is missed.
Those stories are really, I mean, the thing about it is they've just been deliberately suppressed
Hmm.
in order to serve a particular point of view, worldview, economic situation.
Right, right. So I'm going to go on to the next question.
Mhm.
Let me read it here because I think it's a pretty heavy question.
Mhm.
Um, as an artist of your caliber, the statement says, let's see. No, I'm sorry. That's not the question. One, the person thanks you for your time and says this: in time of division, encouraged by the othering of people by those in power, how do we bridge the gap? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think othering has always happened.
Hmm.
And what I'm trying to do is share who we are so that we're no longer the other, because we have always been the other. I've grown up with that. When
Hmm.
I was in high school, there was nothing about Black people in my history book. And when I asked about it, they said, well, that's because Black people didn't do anything.
Hmm.
We were always the other. So I think in order to bring us together, we need to share our entire history, the history of not only white people, but the history of brown and Black people and all of our contributions. I think that that's what's going to be key to to allow us to move forward and have a more cohesive, coherent, respectful view of each other.
Yes, yes, yeah, and there's not, I believe just one answer, to that question. Sometimes I think about the fact that growing up, you made the assumption as a child that everything was invented by a white person.
Yeah. Mhm.
It was just one of those things because this is sort of like no one has to say it.
Mhm. Mhm.
But when you're looking as white as being perfect, from food to people, it's you're thinking like, oh, well, this had to be invented. Like I didn't invent anything.
Right.
I have no legacy here. I have
Right.
no story
Right.
here. And
Mhm.
then you begin to discover, hopefully, the many things that we have contributed to society that make society work. And it's not to take anything away from, but it's to contribute to.
I think it absolutely doesn't take anything away from anyone. I think that we have to be mature enough as a people to be able to accept the mistakes that have been made in the presentation of our history, and to be more inclusive, because that's how we're going to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I personally really do believe that. And it's not a bad thing to know that a Black person has something to do with the traffic light and
Right.
refrigeration and an iron.
Right. The cotton gin.
Yeah.
I got in trouble in school for, Eli Whitney and the cotton gin.
Yeah.
and said, no, I had my facts wrong. And I'm like, but it's in the book, teacher, so yeah, that
And you're being disruptive, and also this because because usually what happens is they try and capture it in a little phrase and then demolish it. So now it's critical race theory,
mhm,
and before it was uh, correctness. I forget what they called it when they tried to be inclusive of of um, of history other than white male history. It
mhm,
was
mhm.
they made a little phrase for it and then proceeded to demolish it
Right,
as though it had no legitimacy.
right, right. So your work, let's talk about Harlem Field recordings,
Mhm,
and let's talk about the process
mhm,
of why you did it, perhaps, how the work came about,
mhm.
and also maybe what you hope, if anything, that it contributes to the world in which we live in.
Well, I always loved the church services in my great Grammy's church. I loved those beautiful songs, those old songs. And then when I got to Yale, I had a class in early African American music.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a book of spirituals by the Johnson brothers, James Weldon Johnson and his brother. And I met several spirituals I had never known before, in particular one called Singing with a Sword in My Hand. And at the time, that was back in 1973. I didn't understand where would that song have been sung, and in where would it have been all right to have been sung. Anyway, I hung on to it, and I did my various researches and so on as we're coming along, and I found that Black people were central, the glue in the Underground Railroad. I found that out when from a history in my little town of
Mm-hmm.
York, Pennsylvania, which was like 12 miles above the Mason-Dixon line, right there in Maryland. So in Pennsylvania, York is. So I made a play. I said, okay, I'm going to be able. This is the beginning of my artivism.
Mm-hmm.
I made a play, and I'm going to show how we freed ourselves from slavery, how we're the center of our own freedom story, and these songs that have always heard. This is, people heard this in the night and they were able to run, or they were able to stay or hide or whatever. I'm going to show how that was, what that looked like on the ground. And so I created the play Singing with a Sword in My Hand.
Mm-hmm.
We actually won the audience favorite award in the New York City Fringe Festival.
Wonderful.
And then fast forward in some other projects, and I decided I wanted to do a CD, and I wanted to use those songs because I really do believe that those songs also hold our history at the time when we were not writing our history down.
Mm.
Because the Quakers wrote the history down, and
Right.
other people wrote the history down, which is why our history is centered on them. But we have our songs which tell our history. And so Harlem Field Recordings is a representation of that, of those songs that I really love, and how we freed ourselves, not only because they're not only spirituals on there, some of them are covers and so on, but in the main, that was my thinking when I put that together, and how those songs still sustain us, and how those songs are the foundation of American music today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All the music stems from those songs that the Africans brought over and meshed with the European sound and so forth, and that is the American music landscape
Right. Right.
today. So that's how Harlem Field Recordings came to be, and I just think those songs are so lovely and wonderful, and they tell our message. And I'm gonna make a new album with some more of them because I just think they're
Exactly.
really fabulous, and they rock, and you can really, and people can sing along and have a lot of fun, and yeah.
Now, do you go around to schools with your work? I mean, outside of colleges, but do you go to educational institutions and share your work at all?
I have done.
Mhm,
One time
mhm.
we had a library series in West Harlem.
Okay.
I have not been invited to. I did go to Medgar Evers College. I'm just trying to think if we were invited to um, middle school or elementary school. It's certainly something I would really love to do.
Mhm,
And the material is, where we got a lot of exposure to young people was when we had a residence kind of at the Schomburg
mhm.
Center for Research in Black Culture
Right.
for over a season, and so we got to meet a lot of young people,
Mhm.
like little toddlers and some older people and so forth. So we got to share with all ages there.
Because you have great storytelling ability.
Thank you.
I was just kind of perusing to your website, and I see how you use your art to tell the story,
Hmm.
of who we are, or
Yeah.
where we are, and where we're going, and
Mhm.
it's sort of like, unless you sort of have an idea of who you are, it's hard sometimes to
Yes.
understand where you're going,
Hmm.
in life. Let's
Hmm.
talk about your early influences. I want the viewers to really understand your background in the church, because I guess during that time, sort of like my mom lived in the South, and church was very much a part of her life. It wasn't an option as to whether or not if you thought you were going,
When we had the guy, I remember
you had to
I
go.
said, I don't want to go to church anymore. And they said, well, when you turn 13, I turned 13 on a Wednesday. I said, okay, I'm not going to church.
Mhm.
And on Sunday, what happened? I
You
got
went
up
to
and went
church.
to church.
You
Well,
went to
there
church.
was my great Grammy's church. She was Pentecostal. And
Hmm.
there was my godmother's church. She was Baptist. And then we went for a time to AME church. I have a little Salvation Army sprinkled in there.
Hmm.
And then my grandmother's church down in Alabama, I guess you would call it Pentecostal. We drove for hours and hours and hours. It seemed like hours, when you're a kid.
Right. Are we
Yeah.
there yet?
Yeah, and we'd be there all day. So it was just really wonderful. All of that, all of that. In addition, at home, well, we were listening to the popular radio, but my folks, they didn't have, they had that console,
Hmm.
and so they loved Ray Charles, Dinah Washington, and I think they had a Brooke Benton album.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was what I was listening to when I was coming up. Mhm.
So we have a question from our viewers. What do you think are the songs that need to be heard in today's society?
What songs need to be heard?
Yeah, what do you think are the songs that need to be heard today in society?
There's so many songs out there.
Yeah.
I'm taking all these many million courses, and they're like 40,000 songs are uploaded onto Spotify in one day.
Wow, I didn't even know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I hesitate to say this particular one or that particular one. There are many songs that I think just are really beautiful. Some of the religious songs are really beautiful. Some of the rappers you know have really beautiful songs and are really helping us to see, some of them even before, when they had very sexualized, very, uncomfortable
Hmm.
lyrics. Some of them have changed and
Yeah.
have, I mean, look at Jay-Z and that Nina Simone. Did you see that one where he had Nina Simone in it?
No, no. When did that come out? Recently?
Yeah.
Okay. No,
It's
I didn't miss
beautiful.
that.
It's beautiful.
Really, I'll go check it out. Definitely.
And some of the popular tunes, I mean, what was the young man's name? He's a I don't remember his name, but he came out with a tune and it caused a lot of furor at the time. So I think, like when you're listening, you can get so much uh inspiration from all over. For
Yeah.
me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to rock with that old music because it moves me. It's
Gotcha.
the stuff that makes me feel wonderful.
There's a gentleman that I like listening to by the name of Toby. I don't want and forgive me if I mispronounce his last name.
And
Um,
Wigway.
can you say it for me again?
And Wigway.
In Nigwe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something
So,
like that. Yeah.
okay, man.
He's
He's an
wonderful.
independent artist. Has done it all himself, with his team, and just lyrically gifted. And
He's
he
wonderful.
tells the story.
Mm-hmm.
He tells the story.
Mm-hmm.
He gets it. He gets it without a cuss word. Not
Mm-hmm.
that, not the cussing is bad, y'all. I know you gotta do what you gotta do, but but he does his thing. I have mad respect for him.
I love him. He represents his family, got
Yeah,
his babies running around. I think it's just gorgeous.
it
I,
really
I,
is.
I really do love him as an artist.
So
Hmm.
do I. So do I.
Hmm.
So see, there's somebody. Check out Toby, y'all.
Yeah.
For real. So I want to talk to you about some of your current projects that you have going on.
Hmm. Well, I just came back from a residency at the Virginia Center for Creative Arts,
Hmm.
and it's lovely because they give you a chance to think and decide what you're going to do.
Hmm.
So, my next project is I want to start at the I want to lift up the United States colored troops,
Hmm.
because without the United
Hmm.
States colored troops, the Union would not have won the Civil War. And I think that's really important to share. And it's completely overlooked.
You
And
said the colored troops. I got it. I did said truth for a minute, so I didn't. Okay, got you. I'm with you now. Troops.
yeah, the United States colored troops.
Hmm.
And they weren't even allowed to fight, the black men, until 1863, and the war started in 1861. And Lincoln, he signed an executive order at the end of May or April, something like that. And in June, Harriet Tubman led um, um, a group of these men in South Carolina to destroy plantations and supply routes on the Combahee River. It was called the Combahee River Raid. And so they went up this. She had gone earlier down there, and she found out where they had planted the mines in the water, and so she was able to steer these boats on June 1st, I believe it was. Steer these boats around these mines. They went up the Combahee River. They destroyed the plantations and the supplies and so. And as they were coming back, they emancipated between 700 and 800 people who
Hmm.
came to the shore, and they picked them up and put them on the enslaved people, put them on the boat. So I want to start there, tell that story from the perspective of a little girl who's who's just caught up in all of this, and then follow our history through Reconstruction, which
Hmm.
is another really, really overlooked part of American history. We made serious contributions at that time.
Hmm.
So I want to be able to share them. And I'm going to use as the song that Harriet Tubman sang, because it's part true and part is in my
Hmm.
imagination. I'm
Right.
going to use the song "Mary Had a Baby." The people
Okay.
keep a coming because the train done come, and so that's also going to be the name of my Christmas EP that I have just finished the music for. That's going to come out this year.
That's fantastic. And if people want to get that, they can visit your website, correct?
Right, that's right. It's not up yet. It's a little early, but
Right.
it
It's
will
okay.
definitely be
It's
there.
okay. We know it's coming. ViennaCarrollmusic.com, correct?
Yes.
And make
Hmm.
sure folks go out there and visit her, follow her, definitely, because we hope to have her in 2022 for Poetry Fest as well. being one of the features of Poetry Fest, and we're looking forward to that. There was something that came to my mind while you were talking about the work that you do. I think it's so important, especially for us today, to tell the story,
Mhm.
to tell the story, because of the fact that there's a movement to take it out of the history book. There's a movement to take these books out of the curriculum. And I find it fascinating when I hear people say, well, we don't want our children to feel guilty. I think actually it's a projection. I don't think it has anything to do with the kids at all. I think it's a space of uncertainty as adults. We don't know what to do, or we don't know what you want, and we're feeling uncomfortable about it. So we're going to project this discomfort onto a generation that doesn't have the information anyway yet,
Mhm.
so that they can make educated decisions for themselves. Part of passing on that history is so that history is not repeated.
Mhm.
Because all around the world, we see history repeated in a negative way because people don't know their history, so thus they repeat it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I commend you for continually to tell the story through your work, because we need that. We really do need that.
It's
We can
what makes me get up in the morning.
Yeah, we really do. So here's another question. Could you possibly recommend a good book on deeper elements of African American culture contributions on American culture and on Black spirituals as well?
Oh my goodness. What I'm going to do is I'm going to refer you to my website because I have lists and lists of books. There, like I really love the story of Black sailors because that was a really hidden story as well, because they were an essential part of the Underground Railroad. They were really important in helping the land-based people get the idea of freedom and the possibility, and also helping move people along. There are two books. One that just recently came out, a Black gentleman who's up in Martha's Vineyard named Skip Finley, and it's a book about whaling captains of color.
Well,
And it talks about during that time, during the age of sail and whaling, before, which was pretty much before the Civil War, how there were many men, Black men, who became whaling captains and who went out and came back and brought the information. And there's another book by a man called Jeffrey Bolster called Blackjacks, and it has a subtitle. I can't quite remember what it is, but it's also a really beautiful, lovely tone about Black men from the 18 covers the history from the late 1700s, early 1800s, up to the Civil War, and talks about them going all over the world and being the first literate people who came back and told stories of freedom. And they were so effective at this that they would lock the gentlemen up when they came to port. They started doing that in the 1820s with the Denmark Vesey Rebellion, and then the southern states, um, one after another, started doing it. So the Black men were still on the ships and they would work in the ports. But when they came to shore, they'd have to go to jail. They'd have to pay for their own room and board until the ship was ready to go back out, because they didn't want them mingling with the people, because they were so effective at spreading the word and helping people to like develop their mindset and
hmm.
change their mind. So those are two books that I really love. There are books about Black people on the Underground Railroad. I think that those are really lovely books. And if you go to my website, viennacarroll.com, you'll you'll see links to all those. I have lists and lists of books because I love books.
We can never get rid of books, and this is just something I wanted to say. Do you do the books like the electronic books, the Kindles, or do you like prefer the paper?
Yeah, I like paper.
I like
I
paper.
love paper. I
And it's
like
just
carrying it around and reading it on the subway, and I like.
absolutely, it'll be never obsolete. That Twilight Zone scene where it says the library that you're getting rid of the library, you're obsolete. That's obsolete. So no, I love books. Vienna, thank you so much for being here with me today. I truly enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for sharing with our audience your wealth of knowledge. So
Thank you for having me. I really enjoy talking about this all the time, and I'm happy that you provided the space in order to do it. Thank
thank
you.
you. Once again, guys, Vienna Carroll, visit her, follow her website, viennacarrollmusic.com, and just appreciate her and the work that she brings to us in this world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Poet Gold and Vienna Carroll. That was an amazing conversation to be part of tonight. So we appreciate sharing and educating everybody. I want to thank also our two staff members who are working, actually three staff members who are working behind the scenes tonight. Melissa Dvorzhina Thomas is working and doing the StreamYard, and Lilia Perez is also working, doing StreamYard and interfacing Facebook. And we also have a new staff member, Amani Jones, and she is working part of this as well. So, this takes a lot of collaboration, and Arts Mid-Hudson is thrilled to be collaborating with Poet Gold on these important conversations. So thank you again. So next month, be sure you mark your calendar because we have another great set of guest artivists coming up. Poet Gold will host guest artivist Boogie and Rez in a conversation, and that's going to be October 28th. So we hope you'll join us then, and thank you again for being here tonight.